My next guests are three sisters from Dublin who, on the face of it, had a seemingly very ordinary childhood. Behind closed doors, however, was a very different story indeed. To tell us about it, would you please welcome Joyce, Paula and June Kavanagh. Welcome to the three of you. Can we go back to the beginning in some ways, Joyce, and talk about the house you lived in Ballyfermot? What was it like growing up there on the face of it?
Well, we had a shop, so we would have been seen as kind of well off. We had a sweet shop. We had first to have TV, first to have a car. We had the best toys. We may have only had one between 10, but it looked like we were really well off. You know, people would have looked up to us and thought, you know, they have everything.
How many of you altogether?
10 in the family.
10 kids.
10 kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
Paula, your father, again, on the face of it, tell me a bit about him. What was he like?
Well, I think to the outside world, he actually would have looked like anybody else. I actually think a lot of people on the road would have admired him, would have thought he was very entrepreneurial. He was extremely creative. Like, we had a grocery shop and then he turned it into a soft toy factory, and then it went from that into a video shop. He had a chipper at one stage. So he had lots of different businesses going. I know the chipper was a disaster. He had lots of different businesses, but in the house he was extremely controlling. He had a very fiery temper. You never knew when he was going to fly off the handle. He was extremely aggressive. He was actually quite lazy behind everything else. Even though he appeared to be a worker, he certainly wasn't. So everybody just knew, just don't ruffle his feathers, because you didn't know who he was going to aim his anger at.
He was very good at coming up with new schemes, but he would develop ideas and then he'd hand it over to us. And the idea was always to keep everybody busy. He didn't like seeing anybody sitting down. You couldn't sit down to watch TV or anything. If he walked into a room, there'd be absolute murder. So he had a job allotted for everybody. There was never a time where you were free.
And your mum, June, what was she like?
Well, my mother was we consider her to be as much a victim as we were.
Do you?
Yeah, like he manipulated. He met her at she was 16.
Yeah.
And remember, like, she had 10 kids. She was pregnant for nearly 20 years of her life. Like, she was just churning out babies. And then she was running a shop. And he was so rude, deliberately. He was we've discovered in hindsight that he was very clever in the way he organised situations. He was so rude to customers in the shop that she would absolutely take over and push him in. So that left him free, and she worked every hour that God gave.
And he was free to roam the corridors and the rooms of your house?
Yeah.
To do what?
Whatever he wanted, really.
Do you want to tell us what happened?
Well, he sexually abused all of the girls. There's 4 girls in the family, but nobody in the family escaped. Like, he mentally, physically,
And
every way, emotionally, he abused everyone in the family. No one escaped.
What age were you when it started? I mean, you're all different ages, obviously, but when can you think back as to when it started getting?
Well, very young. He would start grooming us very young. It would have begun with just fondling and then worked up to full intercourse. But I think myself that, well, I definitely have blocked out. I have no idea of an exact age, but I do know my feet didn't hit the ground. I had to be placed on a bed, so I know it was extremely young. And we've all talked about this, like, we've even blocked out the age it ended, because we're so ashamed that it went on so long that we went into denial. Oh no, it didn't last that long. I was 40 and when you were 16. You didn't want to tell anybody that. And when it ended, you felt guilty because you thought, if I was able to end it, why didn't I do that sooner? So you take full responsibility and you walk around with the full blame, guilt, shame, and he's scot-free.
How bad did it get? I mean, what are we talking about here?
Well, he had full sexual intercourse on a daily basis with all of us. I know it's hard to believe.
I think that's the bit most people find hard to believe, that anybody could have that
kind of sex drive, but it's not about sex. Not about sex, so it is about power and control. Like, under no time ever did he want sex, was he erect and anything like that. It was mainly power, control.
And also because the way he instigated having sex with each of us, he made you part of it. So you had to get him ready, you had to get him into...
And you had to keep an ear open in case somebody was coming up the stairs.
And that made you take all the responsibility, so therefore you were not likely to tell anybody. He was very clever in how he did it. And you weren't likely to tell anybody because you actually assumed all the guilt and you assumed it was you, it wasn't him, it was nothing to do with him.
It's a very complex issue to understand if you haven't experienced it, because it affects every part of a human being's development, the way they think, the way they behave. Like when you imagine a young child being abused, like for somebody to enter your body against your will is horrendous. But for it then to be a parent or a relative, somebody that you have absolute trust in, like to develop, to manage to trust anybody again after that, well, I thought it was impossible, but we've done it.
But you get there.
We managed it.
How did you cope at the time? Because obviously this was happening to you all around the same time for different ages and everything like that. But how do you stay sane? What your children? I'm finding it hard to fathom the enormity and the horror of this. But
because to us it was normal. It was their normal daily life. So whatever happened, you just switched off and went out.
Yeah, I think you do. You shut down. You switch off. It's like it's not really happening to you. Like, I mean, you'd be abused and then 2 minutes later out playing with your friends, and the only evidence was you had red eyes, you'd been crying, and you always had some excuse for that. And nobody asked questions, and it was like it never happened.
And you had tunnel vision. All of your energy went into survival. You know, in school the reason we felt stupid was because there were expectations of us. At home we knew the lay of the land, we knew what was going to happen to us, and horrendous as it was familiar, it was all we knew, and it was all our strength to get through that. So when you go into school and somebody asks you to recite a poem or give 10 times tables, and you couldn't do it because all of your energy has gone into just being. And school was horrendous for all of us. And until we wrote the story, we didn't realise we could have wrote each other's story. We had identical experience of school.
Did you talk to each other about what was happening?
No, not at the time.
No. Did you, and I'm sorry for being so crass about it, but did you have wind of it happening within the house? Did you hear things? Did you see things?
We'll absolutely say no. I'd swear on the Bible,
that
no.
At the time, we didn't know about each other.
No.
At the same time, when we were writing our book, we realised that when we heard the click, this was Dad's signal, click, click, the first thought in our head was, I hope he doesn't want me. So somewhere we actually did know, but not consciously.
Joyce, tell me, the book is called Click Click. Explain that. What does that mean?
That was the signal. Dad called us by using Click Click.
No, he used that for anything. That could be get me a cup of tea,
clean my feet, massage my legs. It could be anything.
It was.
But Click Click was the signal.
So when you heard it, you didn't turn around.
You just froze.
But we believed. I believed I was the only person it was happening to. So did Paula. So did Joyce. But yeah, when we started writing about it and we discussed, well, if you didn't think it was you he was calling, who did you think he was calling? So actually we did know, but there was an unspoken...
You knew who he was beckoning?
No.
You didn't
but we knew that it could be
was.
somebody else, which means, it's complicated.
No, it's not. You're explaining it perfectly.
It's like a contradiction.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you do know, but you know in a part of your mind that is not fully conscious.
Yeah.
There's an unspoken rules that went in our house.
There was
Everybody
a lot of rules
knew
in our house.
Not to enter a room without coughing, making a sound. But then that was never ever spoken about.
Though.
So it was an unwritten rule that everyone seemed to understand all the time.
Yes.
Was the house designed in a certain way that it wasn't too up, too down? Or
No,
it's like the house Jack built because Dad was forever building on,
very badly.
If there's a corner, you know the women are inclined to, fill any gap. Dad was inclined, if he saw a space, he built something in it.
So it was like a warren.
There was loads of little...
Absolutely,
yeah. And people would walk into our house and couldn't figure out how to get back out again.
And do you think that was intended by him to make a nest for his ways?
Didn't think it at the time, but absolutely.
He often spoke about if we ever had money, he wanted to build a place like Dallas where he'd have all his family around him so he could fucking keep abusing the next generation.
I know you're laughing about it, but don't mind, because it's just the fact that you can find humour in the darkest imaginable corner.
Well, that has gotten us through.
I'm sure it has, and I want to ask you about your mum. I mean, I often wonder when I hear about cases like this, where was the mother? And I'm not putting your mum on trial, but I do want to ask you, as her daughter...
I think that's very understandable.
Where does she fit into the scheme of things?
Mum worked, right? She worked from morning till night. First of all, we had the shop, the sweet shop, and she was in the shop from 9 in the morning till 8 at night. And then she did the clean-up. That's when everything happened.
Yeah.
And, it wasn't Ballyferma at this time, and the reality was you couldn't turn your back and everything would be stolen. So we had... The setup in the shop was if Mum needed to go to the toilet, she had to ring a bell. Dad had to go out to a lever to allow her into the house. But you couldn't even walk down to the end of the shop without all the cream cakes going missing. You know, that's okay. Well,
it was like that.
But we knew that was the situation. But that was a setup as well.
Yeah.
So she was tied to the shop.
So you reckon she was unaware or
chose not
to be aware?
Now, if we're honest, she would have known the same way we knew. She definitely didn't know consciously. She would have... I mean, Mam was like us. She was 16 when she met him. He absolutely groomed her as well. She was very badly abused, and it got to the situation... Mam couldn't make a decision about scratching herself without believing she was stupid and asking his opinion first.